Hi, everybody. This is Robert Ronk, and welcome to another episode of Durham Craft Beer Talk. Today, we are on location at Five Paddles, and I am joined with Ian, co-owner and brewer here at Five Paddles. Thank you for joining us today, Ian.
Well, thanks for having me.
Really excited about what we're going to talk about today.
Very cool. Me too.
Yeah, no, big fan of the beer, and been excited to get here. You are a brewer here in Durham that's been name checked by all of the other breweries that I've spoken to.
Well, we talk highly about all the other ones as well, so that's
absolutely good. It's a good team environment out here in Durham, and you're all supporting one another. I know that recently you had gone out to the award ceremony with the guys from Man Antler and Old Flame.
Absolutely, that was a crazy trip. It was how do you fit 20 brewers into a limo?
That has seats for 16.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. We were kind of on top of each other, but it was a great time.
Yeah, no, I had the dubious pleasure of interviewing Scott the next morning.
He
was feeling great.
Yeah.
He was just feeling great. And then spoke to Chris the week after, and he had a lot of fun. Tell us a little bit about the award ceremony and your thoughts coming out of that. What was there anything surprising, exciting, happy?
No, you know what? I always love going to those award ceremonies. I mean, number one, it's always exciting for us because, there's always the hope that we'll win something.
Yeah.
Certainly the first couple of years that we did enter, we won nothing, although we were convinced we were going to win everything that we entered. But that's where you get too close to yourself, But last year, I think, was the biggest surprise. We really thought that we were going to maybe win one if we were lucky, and we ended up winning 5 awards. And then even this year, winning 3 awards. It's such a huge honor because we all come from very, modest beginnings, and to be able to rub shoulders with people who I coveted, I would seek out their beer, I would seek out their approval, and to be able to win awards, beat some people, and just be in the same category as other people. It's pretty amazing. It's really cool.
So walk us through. Tell us about the 3 awards and the beers that you won for.
So this year we won silver medal for our Home Sweet Home, the honey vanilla wheat beer in the honey beer category. There was no gold medal awarded. That's it happens. It's just one of those things.
It happened like 3 or 4 categories.
There was about 4 categories that had that. Yeah. So I mean, both Spencer and I judge at that, and the reality is if it's not good enough to be gold, it's not good enough to be gold. So it does happen. There were a couple categories where there's a gold, silver, but no bronze. So it does happen. But so we won silver for Home Sweet Home. We got a silver medal for our Italian Backyard, which is a basil pale ale. It was great timing for that as well because we're going to be going into the LCBO with that in June.
Fantastic.
So we'll be able to, kind of use that as a little bit of a launching board for that beer. However, we love that beer, and every time that we make it, it's always very, very well received. Then we got a bronze medal for our Midnight Paddler, the Imperial Stout that we do. So, and that one, both Home Sweet Home and Midnight Paddler have won consecutive years in a row, which is great.
Fantastic.
Midnight Paddler, 3 years in a row, we've medaled with it. So,
well, which is great because it speaks to not only the fact that it's a good beer, but is also an extremely consistent beer.
Absolutely. The fact that it has done so well in a very difficult category as well, because Imperial Stouts is a very broad category, but a lot of people are doing them. And there's a lot of great examples. And sometimes with a beer that big, I mean, it is 9.9% alcohol. Sometimes you can have jet fuel. It can be real hot, very boozy. And to find that balance and to be able to have a broad spectrum of judges judge it at their tables and still be able to medal with it, it's a testament to the beer itself. It is good.
No, absolutely. No, it's fantastic. And like I said, I think one of the most important things when it comes to beer is not how great that one batch is, but it's how great consistently all the batches are.
Absolutely. I strongly believe that there is going to be some changes with beers, especially the way that if you strip the ingredients down, it gets easier to have a very consistent beer because if you have the hop level so low that they're barely perceptible, and the malt level so low that it's mostly water, it's very easy to keep that consistent, right? But as you get the more ramped up characters of it, it does get more difficult to keep it consistent. I do believe that from batch to batch, some changes are allowable at the brewery as well as at other breweries. That's really the only way that you can get better is to actually, change it up sometimes.
Absolutely.
But it is great that on a consistent level, it is still, working.
So whatever those micro changes are that's happening in the beer, that's not enough to change the overall appeal of the beer.
That's right.
When it comes to the tasters.
When it comes to brewers, everybody has their own small techniques, and 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. The transfer rate at a different hop schedules, even though the recipe is set out for you, some changes do happen, and so it is kind of hard. And that's where with less ingredients, it is easier because there's
more control.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. That is great. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the name Five Paddles. Where did that come from?
So Five Paddles has a lot of kind of Canadiana attached to it, right? Like you've got the canoeing and that sort of thing. We all have our different experiences with canoeing, some more so than others, some less so than others. But, when you're making a beer, you also use a mash paddle.
Right.
And that's what you do. You use to stir the mash. And for us, we felt it was important for all of us to bring our own mash paddle to the table. And it was to have that brewery feel of all four of us as equal brewers. So we all bring our own paddles to the brewery, but really the beer steers the course of the brewery. And that's kind of where that name came from. I always jokingly say that, a 5 on a T-shirt looks a lot cooler than a 4 anyways, right? But
unless it's Bobby Orr.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Well, no, that's good. And also, I mean, just picking up on that whole sort of concept, right? It was always thought that the paddle that stirred the mash was magic before they understood yeast, right?
Absolutely. There's I don't know how real some of these stories are, but you hear the stories of, having that paddle that was covered in yeast that would stir the wort afterwards. Yeah. And to have that actually inoculate the yeast into the beer. So yeah, there is some magical properties to it, right? And I do believe in that there are some sort of spiritual aspects to the whole brewing process. That's why with the monastic brewing that you get in Belgium and that sort of thing, there are mindful things that you have to do. And a lot of it is, I felt the first time that I made beer that I was a magician. You feel like a wizard, right? You just take, at the time when I first started, it was just a can of, brown goo and added water to it and a little package of yeast, and boom, I've got beer, right? Like it was amazing.
Yeah, it is. Well, this is a perfect segue into a question that I love to ask. Beer making.
Yeah.
Is it art? Is it science? Is it magic? Is it a combination of all of the above?
It is a lot of science. However, if you can become artistic with that science, that's where the magic happens, right? So it is all three. The magic really makes a beer that's good, great. The art of playing with styles and having the freedom to express yourself is very important as well. Sometimes you can get caught up with the whole science of it because, for me, when I started brewing, I didn't really fully understand the science. I was 17 years old when I got my first homebrew kit. But 20 odd years later, you have to go back. If my chemistry teacher had taught how to make beer, I would have paid attention, but I didn't. So if any chemistry teachers out there, please do a beer or wine section, because you'll have a lot of, the marginal students actually start paying attention.
Right.
But it is true, it's that trying to understand it is hard sometimes. You do have to sometimes go back and relearn it. And for us, I strongly believe that we all have a very open mind. And as a result, we're open to learning new things. I don't believe that we can ever learn everything about making beer. The process has been going on for thousands of years.
Right.
But this is something that's changing and adapting very quickly by different techniques. The internet is hugely helpful for that.
Right.
So having those crazy new styles like a New England cloudy, IPA, the juicy IPAs, or doing the lactose IPAs, having milkshake ones.
Right.
All of these things are very new, and even doing the kettle soured beers, right? So these are techniques that they weren't always done before. So I keeping that open mind, I think that all brewers can learn from that, But I don't know. For me, I like the artistic expression of it.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Now, you alluded to the fact that 20 years ago when you were 17, you started making your own beer. What was that journey? Why did you make a beer for yourself at 17?
Well, my intention wasn't to make beer for myself at 17. However, that was the side product of it. My brother, he was going off to college. He was 19, and we lived in Oshawa at the time, and there was a small little place called Little Winemaker. And they had a sign out front that said, I forget what it was. It was like, make 60 bottles of beer for $40 or something like that. And I saw this and I thought, oh, this would be great. You know, my brother's going off to college. He's, you know, we're all broke when you're in college. He's like, yeah, you know, maybe I can get him this gift. And I thought it was an amazing idea. So I got my mom and I told her, and she thought it was a great idea too. And we both went down. I found out afterwards you don't have to be 19 to buy homebrewing equipment because they're not selling you alcohol.
Correct.
But anyways, I bought it for my brother. He used it, but I used it more than he did. And it's funny, I just over the weekend connected with some of my friends from where I went to school in Niagara Falls. And they all remember me fermenting in my closet, in our common room, that sort of thing. So those white plastic buckets filled with, foamy mess. And that's where I started. And at the time, this was early 90s, there was not a lot of, good ingredients out there available. I certainly didn't know where to look for anybody that was interested in brewing. So I just kind of floundered and did what I could. And I made a lot of cider, and I lived in Niagara for 3 years, and I made a lot of fruit wines from there. But then in about 1996 is really when it started to take off for homebrewing. There's a lot of good books that were written. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of yeast that started being available. And then certainly in about 2000 and 2005 is when you started being able to get ingredients, really good ingredients, and good information on the internet.
Right.
I feel like as the four of us at Five Paddles, we met at a really good time. A lot of it was trying to source ingredients at the Homebrewers Club. The information that was out there was kind of few and far between, but it was good information. And now there's just so much out there. The YouTube videos, the podcasts about homebrewing. It's almost information overload.
Right.
But for us, it was that journey of trying to get better information and push each other to get better information and make better beer.
So this passion has already gone on for 20 years. You've never really stopped brewing something since you were 17.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until after I'd opened the brewery. I look back on my life and I go, geez, I've always had something bubbling away. Whether it was beer or wine or cider or even dough, making my own bread.
Right.
There's always been some sort of fermentation going on. And I've often wondered what kind of drew me to that, right? But I look back and I've had conversations with my family about it. And I don't know if there's any parallels or whether it's a genetic thing, but my grandmother, she worked on the bottling line, the labeling line of Double Diamond at Bass Brewing in Burton-on-Trent. And I only found this out after I opened up the brewery that her grandfather and her great-grandfather were both brewers at Bass.
Oh, so, wow.
I don't know. Maybe it's in my blood.
Yeah, it sounds
I do love English beers, so there is something to that. But it has always been there, and I did not realize it until just only about 3 years ago.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Crazy. Yeah.
No, that's great. So, touching a little bit on beer itself, you say you love English beers, and tell me a little bit about your sort of tentpole beers. What are your mainstays? Something that people can pretty much always find from you guys.
Right now, guaranteed. Well, I say that loosely. Somewhat guaranteed. Almost 99% of the time, you can find Home Sweet Home beer. So our honey vanilla wheat beer. When we first opened up, our idea was to never brew the same beer twice and to always do something different. It's very difficult in my mind to believe that I could create 3 beers that the public would love till the end of time. I didn't drink like that, so why would I want to brew like that? When I was brewing at home, one year I did 38 batches in 52 weeks, and each one was a completely different beer. I didn't repeat twice.
Wow.
But that was me exploring the different styles and the expectations out there. But that was our idea with the brewery, is to just keep on pushing the boundaries and doing something new. However, when you start selling beer, that's when it gets a little bit different, right? So we went to it initially with the passion of making beer. And one of the local restaurants, Chatterpaul's, the guy who was in charge there, he said to us, if you keep making this Home Sweet Home, we will keep buying it. And at that point, you look at it and go, okay, well, hey, geez, now we're starting to get paid for doing this. Okay, maybe we'll rebrew it. So we started rebrewing it. And the more we did it, the more people liked it. And it's just one of those ones that it's changed quite a bit over time. And every now and then we'll do a non-filtered original version, because the original one was non-filtered, lots of wheat in it. There was very low hop quality to it and an incredible amount of vanilla in it.
Okay.
And the newer varieties, we're going for shelf stability. We're in the LCBO with it, so we do sell a lot of it, and also with a lot of the bars and restaurants. They do want a filtered beer. It's an approachable craft beer. So it has changed quite a bit, but every time I have it, I drink it all the time because it is always here. I'm sampling it from beginning to end. We've got several tanks dedicated just to that beer. So, I often think about Bose and their lug tread, where they have a giant lug tread room, and it's like, eventually they must get sick of that beer. But the reality is I'm trying it, a couple times a week, and then I'll still take a couple of bottles home, every so often.
Right.
And I'm always amazed. It's always, it's reassuring because it's a good beer, I still enjoy it, even though I have it all the time.
So is that what you would consider your one staple anchor that is dedicated and constantly in rotation?
It is constantly in rotation for sure. There are a couple of other ones that we try to keep into the rotation as well, but it's all about tank space right now. We've always struggled with tank space just because the demand is a little bit higher than what we expected. Although, we're appreciative of that demand. The supply, we're always chasing our tail on that one. So things like In Your Face are IPA. Things like Skull Pucker are dry hopped sour. The Midnight Paddler, it's most of these, we just can't have it as often as everybody wants them.
Right.
So certainly, as time progresses and we can buy more tanks, it'll get easier. But for now, Home Sweet Home is that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Home Sweet Home is that one, but from a philosophy perspective, there's a couple other ones that if you could wave a magic wand and have 10 more tanks back there,
absolutely,
you would have a couple of others that were dedicated and constantly in production to keep up with demand.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the three big ones are Home Sweet Home, the Skull Pucker Sour IPA, and the In Your Face IPA.
Right.
I would love to personally have a lot of our Belgians in serious rotation as well, just because I really enjoy that style. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to pick one, right? Like we've got so many good beers in our portfolio that it's like I'm a dad, right? Like it's like picking your favorite child.
Yeah.
You look at the one and go, okay, well, I love you all differently, but I love you all.
But I love you all.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting because I find in speaking to a lot of beer makers, there is that difficult concept between wanting to constantly do something new and be creative, the artistic aspect of it, but then having the people coming through the door or the rep showing up and saying, I want this. Almost on some level, you have to compromise some of the artistic creativity to keep making sure that the bills get paid because that's what people want to buy.
Absolutely. It is a hard balance to work through because the demands are high. And because we have a front tap room and we talk to our customers quite a bit, and we've always been very open to input from our customers, you do hear it quite a bit. You do hear a lot of, you should brew this again. When's this coming back? And it is kind of hard to find that balance because we have a lot of tanks and we do have a lot of smaller tanks, so we can kind of do a small run of 400 bottles or a few kegs. But still, the demand is really high on ones that I've even forgotten that we made, from years ago. So it is hard to find that balance and to make everybody happy, but we've said it right from the beginning. You can't make everybody happy. It's as simple as that.
No, you can't. That's for sure.
Yeah, and just as long as your offerings are good and as long as the beer's delicious.
Yes.
You may not be able to get the one that you really, really want from 3 years ago, but you can still have one that's just as good.
So when it comes to that element of creativity and a seasonal or a one-off, what's that philosophy that you guys bring to the table on making some of those decisions?
It really, each one is very different the way that we approach it. So a great example of a seasonal would be our pumpkin beers. When we first opened up, we were like, what are we going to do? I don't want to do pumpkin beer. Ed doesn't even like pumpkin beers. And, we look at that and go, okay, well, we're all beer geeks. We all are on multiple forums online. And the way that people buy and consume pumpkin beers, most people don't go to it looking like I'm going to enjoy pumpkin beers. They buy as many as they can. They take pictures of them and they've got, let's say, 7 of them, there's a lineup of 7. They go, oh, I really like this one. This one wasn't too bad. The rest of them were garbage. So you're immediately setting yourself up to be judged harshly.
Right.
And there are a few people that do like pumpkin beers, but the general public do not. So we weren't going to do one. And there were so many people asking about it. Well, are you going to do pumpkin beer? Where's your pumpkin beer, right? So what we did our very first year is we said, all right, well, there, 5 paddles, we're going to do 5 pumpkin beers. And we had 5 very different pumpkin beers. So we had the Haunted Home Sweet Home, which is a honey vanilla wheat with pumpkin spice. We had a coffee pumpkin porter. We had a pumpkin oatmeal stout. We had a chipotle cranberry pumpkin ale. So we were really pushing the boundaries, right? And it created such a buzz that now every year we have to do 5. So part of what we did was a little bit of a middle finger to the the pumpkin beers.
Well, you were creating your own lineup, so at the end of the day, you still won.
Absolutely, we still and it's good too because then it allows us to be creative. So we do have a couple that we do every year. Mm-hmm. We have the Frankenbrew, which is a pumpkin Belgian double. We have the oatmeal pumpkin stout. We have the honey vanilla pumpkin beer. But then we have 2 that we just kind of play with. Right. And that we can kind of be very creative with. And one's called Jump the Pumpkin Shark. Every year it's always something different because really, pumpkin beers have jumped the shark. Yeah. And it then allows us to really push the boundaries. Last year we did a curry pumpkin stout. We can do spiced beers, smoky beers. Mm-hmm. It's just really about really pushing the boundaries on that one. And almost with a little bit of, tongue in cheek, like, okay, so you want us to up it, we'll up it.
Yeah. So beyond pumpkin, which I think we can all agree, just pumpkin in general has jumped the shark.
Absolutely.
When it comes to fall.
Oh, yeah.
When you're going into other seasons, what are some of that thought process? Is it ingredient based? Is it style based? What is it that sort of pushes your creative buttons to make those decisions?
There's 2 sides to it. We've got ingredient based. We do our strawberry wheat every year, and we only do it during strawberry season. Because Ontario strawberries are amazing. If you buy strawberries throughout the year, you get those big giant California ones in January. You can get them 12 months of the year now, but they're not good. Not as good as when you get them fresh picked. Right. So we started off picking our own strawberries. Mm-hmm. Now we brew so much of it, we have to just buy the strawberries in. Right. But getting that fresh Ontario strawberry and using real fruit, it makes a huge difference. As a result, we only have the beer for about 2 months out of the entire year, but people look forward to it. So they can't wait to have it, which is great because, as a kid, I remember having seasons with my fruit. Yes. Fruit and vegetables had seasons, and nowadays they don't. I just picked up, we had to buy some fresh basil for our Italian backyard, and, it's April. Where do you find basil locally? Well, it comes from Florida. The plants are coming in. We're using real basil, not a basil extract or dried basil. Right. But still, it's available. But with some of the stuff, it's great to be seasonal. And we just say, you know what? No, we're going to be seasonal. The other thing, too, is sometimes, you have to think about patio season, lighter beers. You have to think about winter season with the darker beers. Right. However, the reality is, if it's 35 degrees in August, we'll still have people asking for our Imperial Stout.
And it's what people like, right? Yeah, you just like a particular style sometimes, and it doesn't really matter what the weather is out there.
Absolutely. And sometimes I always go through these phases myself. In the middle of summertime, I'm sick of light beers, and I really need something dark and robust. And same thing within the wintertime. Come January, I am so done with, having those dark beers. I need a Pilsner or a Kolsch or something like that, so that it actually changes up the palate depending upon the time of year. And I feel that there are a lot of people like that. It's tough because when you're talking to, selling through an LCBO or something like that, or, some bars and restaurants, they have this notion that it's like, no dark beers in the summer. Yeah. No light beers in the winter, stouts are only for December, and I don't believe that. And we've proved it here at the brewery that even in the hottest of times, people want an 11% bourbon barrel aged whatever, right?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's getting to the point where people just want good beer.
Right? Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I remember listening to a talk from the founder of Brick Brewing, and he said, I feel sorry for anybody running a brewery now because the average beer drinker can really call BS on you. They will not hold back. And if you're not making good beer, you will be held accountable for that. And that's a reality. We went opened this brewery because we wanted to make good beer.
Right.
You know, 5 years ago when we were building the brewery and trying to drink locally in Durham region, there was nothing. That's why we all started, you know, doing the home brewing club that we were at. It's because there was not a lot of good craft beer available out in Durham region. It was really empty.
Yeah.
And I remember there was the Royal Oak was the one that had the best beer, and it was an import. You know, they had Fuller's London Pride. And, you know, what does that say about the Durham region and their consumption of craft beer? So, yeah, you do have to make good beer now, right?
But flash forward 5 years where we are now, I think it's a completely remade region to a certain extent, with a number of local producers and a number of establishments that are almost becoming focused on the sort of craft beer that they are selling.
Absolutely. The world has changed in Durham. I will say that. It really has. We started off back in 2013 and you couldn't find a good pint. And now there's 5 breweries, 6 breweries now in Durham region. There's another 2 opening in Whitby in the next year. You know, it's just expanding so quickly and so fast. The demand is there. We knew it back then, and we were deluged with people coming in for good beer. Even though we were doing crazy things and one-offs and very intense beers, there was a lot of people coming in. We sold out all the time. And doing styles that everybody was looking at us going, no, you know what, you're not going to make it. You know, we had a bit of a backlash from some of the brewing community that has been around for a while. And there was a little, you know, that whole, oh, well, you know, you're always doing something different. Where's the consistency kind of thing, right? So the reality is there was a bit of pushback from the community because, once you start selling through the LCBO in the beer store, you got to have 1 or 2 brands. They don't want you to have 150. You know, but the buying public does. And we do have a lot of people that come in on a Friday, they look in our fridge, and if they don't see something new, they'll walk away. You know, and that's the way I drink beer sometimes too. You know, I always try something new. I'll buy whatever's newest on the menu, or I'll go to the LCBO, and if there's nothing new there, I'll just walk out. So it does happen like that. So it is a little bit fickle, I will say that, but the demand is definitely there, and it has leaps and bounds. I mean, there's such good breweries out here in Durham. I think that we're a little bit unsung. You know, there's something about Toronto breweries and Toronto beer drinkers that they look at Durham region and they go, oh, they're making beer out in cow country. You know, they don't realize that the majority of people that work in Toronto live out here.
Are all living here. They're moving in. So I just want to ask a little bit about evolving trends and evolving palates. I mean, 20 years experience in brewing something, 5 years of you guys being open almost, how have you seen the palate of the average drinker, both yourself and the public who come in and buy the beer? How have you seen that mature over the time frame that you've been making beer?
Well, it's changed an incredible amount, really. You know, the light lagers, the 4% or 5%, very easy drinking, buy it by the case, as cheap as possible. It still exists, but that's not the only way that it's done. You know, 20 years ago when I was going to the LCBO, I always jokingly called it my tour around the world, right? You couldn't get a lot of Ontario craft. So back in 91, 92, I'd get a little 8-pack and I'd fill it up with 8 different beers. And that was odd. It was very weird. And I'd take it up to the till and they, you know, they bring me through going like, wow, what are you doing? You know, you got 8 different beers. When I talk to people at the LCBO and I say, how do people buy beer now? It's 8 beers, you know, 8 different beers when you buy 8. So people are buying differently, they're drinking differently, and it's happened in a short amount of time. So the palates have changed. I think they're progressing. They're getting better. I always say that the conversation has changed. Beer, the way we talked about beer was, you know, do we have enough? Is there enough for the weekend? How many cases did you get? You know, beer store's going to be closed on Monday.
It was volume.
Absolutely.
Not
hey,
style.
I got a hat with this. You know, I got a T-shirt with this. Well, now the conversation is where did you get that? Have you been to this brewery? Have you talked to those guys? Oh yeah, they're great. You know, it's what style of beer is this? Is this IPA just like that IPA? Oh, can you taste the Amarillo hops? Can you taste the Citra? Is there Sriracha Ace in this? You know, what kind of bourbon barrel did they use? Was it, you know, Four Roses? Is it a whiskey barrel? Is it bourbon? You know, all that kind of crazy argument. So the discussion is now about the beer. And there are beer drinking groups where guys would get together and hang out and play cards before. Now they actually, you know, they will have an untapped night where they come in and they will untap different beers. It's like, how many can I? It's a little bit of a, it's a competition to see who can get the coolest beer. And I do find it very interesting that there's a lot of people out there that are real white whale beer drinkers, where they have I've untapped 2,000 different beers. Yeah. Or I finally got, I got to try the Heady Topper. I got to try the Pliny the Younger.
Yeah, I got my hands on Pliny the Elder or the Younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no, absolutely. And you see that all the time now, especially in sharing on social media. It's like,
social media is amazing, right? It's and there's a lot of beer exchange groups where we have a lot of people that come in here, and our beer is a little bit hard to find, especially outside of the region. So we do have a lot of people come in. They buy a full case in full intention of sharing that beer with others.
Yeah.
So it is kind of cool that there is a sharing of it. The community is a very open community. Mm-hmm. It's a very open sharing community. Not a lot of people are monetizing on this. It's just people that are out there having a good time and trying to outdo each other, which is in a friendly, competitive way, which is cool.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the LCBO. It's come up a couple of times. So how has that been for you from an experience perspective? Because I've heard a little bit all over the map. It's not the golden ticket that everybody kind of thinks it is. And It's kind of a really arduous process to get your beer in there. And
it is. The way that I can look at it is we live in Ontario. This is the way that it is. Mm-hmm. Is it getting better? Yeah, it's getting better. Are there more people getting onto the shelf? Yes, there are a lot more people getting onto the shelf. I always believe that if the beer is good enough, it'll sell. Mm-hmm. If people can connect with the brand and the brewery, it will sell. And no matter what, it will, which is great. But yeah, the LCBO, is it a challenge? Sure. Is it an open market, very easy to sell? No, it's not. It is a little bit arduous to get into the LCBO. However, we are selling a controlled substance. Mm-hmm. It is controlled. And as a result, there's, stringent guidelines. So having the lab testing, having a very mature and appropriate way to sell your beer, it is good. So there are the upsides to it, right? Because as a consumer, and I'm not just a producer, I'm a consumer at the LCBO as well. I know that I'm going to get a product that has passed all the lab tests, mm-hmm. that is going to, not affect me in a way that is unexpected. But also that the brand is not going to be, I'm a dad too, right? And I've got kids and I have a very mature aspect about raising the kids. I know they will eventually drink, but they're young teenagers right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to be drawn into the drinking at too young of an age. Mm-hmm. So you do have to have appropriate labeling, mm-hmm. and that sort of thing, and appropriate controls on it. So LCBO, yeah. I mean, it can be the devil or it can be good,
How do you find, I mean, it's becoming a very crowded space in the LCBO. As they're changing their mandate, they're trying to support Ontario craft mm-hmm. beers more and more. It seems as though now you walk into, whether they have the cold area in the back or whether it's a smaller one and they just have a bit of a dedicated area towards Ontario craft beer, it seems like a lot of labels.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, not a lot of education.
I'm always amazed because when I go into the LCBO, I just assume that everybody liked working there because they love beer, wine, or spirits or something, right? And I've always, whenever I've done anything, I've thrown my all into it. Mm-hmm. So when I was, landscaping, I knew everything about landscaping. Mm-hmm. I knew everything about plants when I was planting. You put everything into it, and when you go into a place like that, you realize a lot of these people are there just because it's a job. Right. And I get that too, mm-hmm. right? But the education, I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there. Mm-hmm. If you really want to find it, you will find it. And I think that the good part of it is that on a very immediate scale, you have the world in your pocket. You can pull mm-hmm. out your phone, and no matter where you are, Untapped has all of the SKUs on there. You just have to boop, and you will have all the information that you want. Is it a well-rated beer? What's the beer description about it? Mm-hmm. If the people don't know, that's okay. You can find out immediately, which is good. However, the way that beer is treated, it's treated like a commodity. It always mm-hmm. has been, mm-hmm. And it's not. It's a food product. I always try and remind everybody, and especially if you get into unfiltered beers, non-pasteurized beers, which most of our beers mm-hmm. are, it is a food product. You'd never expect a 6 or 12 month shelf life on a loaf of bread. So why would you do that with your beer?
Absolutely.
It's you can still eat the bread 6 months later, but
You
it's
might not feel
gonna
very
be
good.
Absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah.
really, it and keep that in mind. Brewers are making a product that they want you to have,
Right.
and I want you to have it fresh because that's when it tastes the best. I don't want you to sit on it for 6 months.
Well, and some of the larger craft producers are sort of mandated, where sell by this time period and it has to be stored this way. And if you don't do that, you don't get to sell my product.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a larger craft brewery who has those sort of options to say to people. But to your point, like it is something that is being produced. It has a finite life, and it has a way in which it should be stored and should be enjoyed. Yeah. And if you're not doing that, then you're compromising your brand.
Absolutely. And it's tough, right? Because I can control the way that I sell my beer here at the brewery. But when I put it out into the world, into the LCBO or on tap somewhere, I lose all control.
Right.
I always think about some of the macro beers and the way that they sell their beer. They talk about how cold their beer is. Ice cold, mountain cold, right? Like it's all that cold.
Filtered.
Yeah. And the reality is the only thing as a brewer that I cannot control is the temperature that it's served at.
Right.
So that's their only selling point, right? I always find that very funny. The only selling point they have is what they can't control. So, but it is true. You try your best to make it as best as possible. And, I'm just as guilty as the next person. I'll go into my fridge and I've got cream ales that are a year old or, an IPA that's 8 months old.
Right.
And, but as a beer purchaser, I should be better. As a beer drinker, I should be better. But also as a beer drinker, I look at it and go, okay, well, this may not have been their intention.
Right.
I will have it now, but I will keep an open mind about it. And if it's not peak, it's because I didn't drink it while it was peak.
Right.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the future. What does the future look like for you guys? I know you were saying that, you wish you had more space or you wish you had, the more ability to brew more beer.
Yeah.
Give us the next couple of years. What does that look like from an expansion perspective and just what you guys are going to be doing with the brewing?
Well, the next few years it's changed so much. The landscape is so different now than it ever was. It's very difficult to see where we're going to be in 5 years because I never would have believed that we would be here in such a short amount of time. The amount of staff that we have, the amount of tank space that we have. Do I want more tanks? Absolutely. There's more beer to be made. We always have that fear. I have that fear of running out because we spent years running out of beer constantly.
Right.
So that's kind of ingrained into my psyche now. I'm always worried that we're going to run out of beer. So, we always push each other. We push each other to be better, to make better beer. There's a lot of people out there that want it. So that's great. Can we get more brands out there? Absolutely. We're going to try. Is it difficult to get out there? Yeah, it is very difficult to get more brands out there. But we're going to try, and we're going to keep pushing. We're starting to push the envelope a little bit more as in regards to the styles that we're doing. So we're getting more into some mixed fermentation, doing some sours. I would like to eventually get into the terroir of doing some cool ships. We've got a couple of crazy ideas to try and inoculate with wild microorganisms from different regions. So maybe in the future we'll be doing that. We always jokingly do our Five Paddles vision quests, where a group of us will get together and go on different brewery tours,
right,
which I think is important because then you can talk to other brewers in different regions and see what their struggles and difficulties are, and also their successes. So I'd like to keep on pushing those boundaries and see if we can kind of mix in the making of the beer with one of our vision quests. We will be doing a lot more collaborations this year. I do know that. But yeah, really, if I can make more, yeah, I'd like to make more. But not at the sacrifice of making moderate beer or bad beer. It still has to be good. I look at some of these other bigger breweries that are making an insane amount of beer, what I would consider an insane amount of beer, where they're brewing at 10,000 liters at a time, and they have 100,000 liter tanks, and they can still make good beer. They can still make delicious beer, stuff that I would think that would come off of a 500 liter system. it does give me hope, because a little part of me was, no, stay small, because it's the only way you can control it, make good beer.
Right.
But the reality is you can, on a big scale, make really good beer, and that's good. It's just always a challenge, distribution, trying to get it out there.
Right.
Would I like to be national? Absolutely. I'd like to be in all of Ontario, all of Canada. I'd love to be able to go to Seoul, Korea, and buy 5 paddles, on tap. I would love to eventually get to that point. It would be cool just to be able to have that product out there. It's pretty amazing. Just to think that I started in my closet with a plastic pail with 20 liters of very gross tasting, but stuff that did the job, to being able to get it out there into the world. That'd be fantastic. Just amazing.
That's great. So, you touched on a couple of interesting, things that you'd like to try in the future. I just want to drill down a little bit on that. What are some of the beer making, methods or products or styles, something that you haven't done that you would just love to, get your hands on and play with?
Yeah, there's a few that one stands out, and there's a few breweries that are really starting to go into that direction, which is it's a very old way of brewing, doing a spontaneous fermentation. So you consider Cantillon, Brussels, Driefonteinen, a lot of these areas, they would actually make the wort and cool it outside in a cool ship.
Right.
So you would get the local microflora, microfauna to come in and ferment the beer. Now, it does take a long time. It can take 1, 2, 3, sometimes 5 years, in order to get a good beer at the end of it. The beers are incredibly complex. They've got, balsamic vinegar and lactic acid and a lot of funk. There's a lot of really weird flavors going on, but it's almost an honoring a tradition of the way the beer used to be. We've only really had these very clean, easy drinking beers for a very short amount of time. Years ago, all beers were sour just because they needed to be spontaneously fermented. They were done in, oak wood barrels and that sort of thing. So to go back and to try something like that, I'm very interested. I'm very curious as to what the local microfauna and microflora is like. The wild yeast, the wild bacteria that are just floating around. I'm curious as to see what sort of flavor profile we can get out of that. But you don't know what that, because when you first start fermenting it smells like diaper, it smells like vomit, it smells like nail polish, but it changes over years. So it's a very long process, and I'd love to find out what that end result would be.
Well, interesting. I've been reading a couple of articles in All About Beer recently, where people are really turning to try some interesting things with cool ships. And one brewery was they were bringing the cool ship out to time with the opening of the flowers on fruit trees.
Right.
So dropping it in an orchard right around the time that the fruit tree buds were all popping, to try and capture that wild bacteria and yeast being released by that process. So it's an interesting process for sure, but as you are alluding to, it's a huge gamble for a brewery, because you could lose an entire batch.
Yeah, and the gamble is very difficult too, because not only could you lose a whole batch, but let's say you do a test batch and you say, well, I'm going to do 1,000 liters. Well, it could turn out in 3 years' time to be the most incredible world-class beer. It could be the best beer made by man.
Right.
And
there's no way you can ever make it again.
3 years to do it again, right? So that's the gamble too, is that you could put something out into the world and then you could never be able to repeat it.
Right.
So it is a hard gamble, but that's what we do here. Is that we've always said that it's okay to take that risk. The drain's right there. We've got a drain on the floor. It just goes, if it's a bad risk, just pour it out. It's not going to kill any of us. I will wake up tomorrow and I will make beer. But if it did work, fantastic. If it didn't, well, dump it.
Right. No, and that's the best possible philosophy that you can have, because it allows you to keep that edge of creativity going without the fear of saying, well, we tried and it didn't work. Let's start from scratch with something new. So any other particular products? I mean, the Wild is awesome. And I think anybody who's listening to this is really excited about what we can come in here and get sometime in the future. But anything else? Is there any particular hops that you've never had a chance to try, or any particular malts that you haven't had a chance to try, or even a style of beer that you haven't made yet that you would like to get into?
Well, one of the ones that we just did recently was a milkshake IPA that has, so you've got a 5% IPA, very hoppy, dry hopped as well. We did it with fruit, with mango, but we added lactose, so milk sugar, a non-fermentable sugar to it, as well as vanilla. So you had the body and taste of a double IPA, but it only had the alcohol content of a 5% IPA, regular IPA.
And as the non-creator of it, but a consumer, I can tell you that it was a fantastic drink.
Yeah, it's almost something that would gross you out. Spencer said when we first opened up, and we still hold to this, I'm either going to blow your mind or gross you out. One or the other. We'll be happy with both, you know? So it is kind of fun that we can do something like that. So milkshake IPAs are going to, the lactose IPAs, they're really starting to take off. You're going to see a lot of that. I'm very curious as to see what's going to happen with hops over the next, 4 or 5 years. The hop market is a seller's market right now. The demand is so high for hops. It's going to be very difficult for all of us to get our hands on it. I'm curious as to see where in the world people are going to start growing hops and what sort of hops are going to come out of those regions. So the Ontario hops are starting to grow. They're starting to mature. You're starting to see more people getting into hop growing, which is fantastic. The more local I can get, the better.
Right.
The terroir of the hops growing locally is fantastic. There's a lot of really cool, small flavor changes that are so different than what we get from the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
So that's great. I really like to see where that's going to go. But yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a guy on the weekend. He was a home brewer. And he said, I really didn't think IPAs were going to take off the way that they did. I really thought it was just going to be a short-term thing. So that was kind of funny for me, right? Yeah. Where I was like, I see what you're saying. Everybody has said it. All the beer bloggers have said it. Oh, there's going to be a time where, the bottom's going to fall out of an IPA. The reality is you got to have an IPA in your roster. If you don't have a good IPA in your roster, man, oh man, they will not come knocking on your door.
Well, as you were saying earlier, when you first started going into the LCBO, I mean, the thing that most people were buying were the light lagers, right? Easy drinking, low alcohol. But now it seems like, the default style of beer that people are going to be reaching for first is that IPA.
Oh yeah, like there's the amount of people that walk in, and if we don't have an IPA on the shelf, they will walk out. It does happen. And talking to any of the other breweries out there, and they all say, oh, I really want to, my blonde, my light lager, my easy drinker, my English pale ale. They still need an IPA because everybody walks in the door and says, where's your hoppy beer, right? So that is really cool, and I'm really there's a lot out there. I think there might be a throwback to some traditional styles of beer, just because, well, for one, there's going to be a lot of difficulty finding hops. So things like Belgian beers or English beers that are somewhat low hopped, or they use hops that are a little bit more easy to find. There might be a lot of throwbacks in those respects. But yeah, IPAs, man, they're an amazing thing. It's so cool and it's so great.
And there's so many styles.
But drink
right?
fresh, please. Drink IPAs fresh.
Drink them quickly and often.
Absolutely.
And keep coming in and getting more. No, I agree. I from a style perspective, I lived in London, England for a while, and I really got hooked on extra special bitter, and it's just not a style that's really taken off. And
really Ontario was built on English bitters,
right.
Like all of the breweries that opened up, 10, 15, 25 years ago, they all had English bitters. And if you can still find them on the shelf sometimes, which is too bad because I will default back to an English bitter easy. Because it's such a good beer. But yeah, it's such a different side of the world from English bitter to a double IPA.
Well, whenever I can find an ESB somewhere, I'm always running over to grab one. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you for your time today. Love to come back in when the strawberry wheat is ready.
Usually in July, strawberries start growing in June, and then we still have to ferment the beer. So usually by after Canada Day, we always say the strawberries are available.
Fantastic. So I will be happy to come back then, and we can talk about how the batch went, and if you're already all sold out, and do a little tasting and talk about this year's batch.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today. This is Robert Rock. Keep drinking craft beer, and we will keep talking about it. Take care, everybody.